welcome back to the Road to Success MCAT Test Prep series. This video is titled Social Psychology, and I'll be discussing the various different things that occur in our social lives that affect our brains and our behavior. This is going to be the halfway point in the psychology series where I cover everything you need to know about psychology for the exam. This video will be broken off into 3 different parts, which will be personality theories, psychological disorders, and socialization. All 3 are very important and very dense topics, so I highly recommend that in addition to this video, you go through a lot of practice and a lot of passages to truly understand what is going on in our brains. That being said, we have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to be jumping straight into it, starting off with Sigmund Freud's personality theories.
Alright, let's start off with psychoanalytic theory by Sigmund Freud. Freud was a strong believer of libido and destrutto, or the desire to create versus the desire to destroy. This drove him to develop the idea of the id, ego, and superego. Id is our basic desires, and it tends to be very inappropriate and violent. Our superego is our moral conscience, and it serves as an angel on our shoulder. The id and the ego are constantly fighting with each other, and the ego exists to find a middle ground or resolution to prevent things from getting out of hand. We talked about the hierarchy of needs in the previous video, but to recap it, it essentially states that we need to resolve our basic desires before our higher needs. Maslow and Carl Rogers both agreed that people are inherently good and must accept themselves and others to reach self-actualization. The idea of self-concept is essentially the process of realizing this. Behaviorist theory ties in with classical and operant conditioning. The works of Pavlov and Skinner state that our environment shapes our personality. I'll discuss these in detail in the next video, as they are very important to know in depth. But for now, I'll just say that operant conditioning uses positive and negative reinforcements to mold the person into learning the right behavior, while classical conditioning conditions a stimulus to create a conditioned response. Now, moving on to trait theory, let's talk about Gordon Allport. He stated that we have cardinal traits, which are personality traits, that are essential to our personality. These influence our central traits, which are not as significant as our cardinal traits. Secondary traits are essentially preferences. Raymond Cattell used a 16 personality fact questionnaire to confirm that we have traits that define us. Eysenck stated that we have 3 dimensions of personality, which would be extroversion, neuroticism, and psychoticism. These traits are later expanded on, and they became the ocean theory, which stands for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. As you can see right here in the graphic, it's listed out right there. Now let's touch on some minor personality theories really quick. Feel free to pause the video and take notes on the biology theories, but for observational learning, we're going to be discussing this in depth. Albert Bandura might sound familiar to you, and that's because he is responsible for the Bobo doll experiment. This experiment was where the children would see the adults beat up the Bobo doll and imitate the violence that they saw when they were playing themselves. This confirmed that we learn what we see. Mirror neurons are neurons in our body that help us with this, as it helps us imitate the action that we are seeing. Lastly, social cognitive theory states that cognition is necessary for behavioral development, and it's what allows for change to occur. Now, let's move on to the meat of this video, the psychological disorders. These are very important to know for the exam, and I'll be highlighting a few of them that will definitely be showing up on test day. Feel free to pause and take down notes of the different types of disorders, but I'll be talking about very specific ones moving forward, starting now. So, schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is caused by shrinkage of the frontal and temporal lobes. Increased dopamine is also observed. This causes cognitive dysfunction and damage to the limbic structure and temporal cortex. These cause negative and positive symptoms to occur. These are presented right here in this graphic. I'm highlighting this because I really want you guys to read this and look into what these are, because on the MCAT, they will be testing the difference between negative and positive symptoms. Risk factors include genetics, physical stress in pregnancy, and underlying psychosocial factors. Depression is caused by decreased activity in the frontal lobe and increased activity in the limbic system. Decreased activity in the RAF nuclei, the locus coeruleus, and the VTA lead decreased neurotransmitters and a change in neuroplasticity. Symptoms include hopelessness and loss of interest. Medications include SSRIs, which prevent reuptake of serotonin in the neural synapse, causing them to be active on the synaptic or the postsynaptic receptor for longer periods. And also, MAOIs are also going to be used similarly to SSRIs, but instead, the gist is that they increase the amount of monoamides that are present, such as dopamine or serotonin. And you can see right here, the graphic shows the specifics of how this occurs. Risk factors include genetics and psychosocial factors. We already discussed Alzheimer's disease, but let's review it in detail. It's caused by cerebral atrophy in the temporal lobes, and it might be caused by genetic mutations and high blood pressure. Key abnormalities include loss of neurons, neurofibrillary tangles, and of course the amyloid plaques. There are no cures for this disease, but higher brain use can be used to delay the inevitable or prevent it outright. That would be higher educations, challenging jobs, stuff like that. Lastly, we have Parkinson's disease. This disease is categorized by motor abnormalities like stiff muscles and abnormal walking. This is from the loss of dopaminergic neurons and damage to the substantia nigra. Lewy bodies are a characteristic of the disease. There are no cures, but treatment is being explored in the world of the world of stem cells. Now let's move on to socialization. Starting with conformity. Why do we conform? We usually do it for guidance or out of fear of rejection. Because of this, group interactions tend to become very polarized. This causes original opinions to become even more extreme. Groupthink is when the unity of the group will suppress minority opinions. And obedience is similar yet distinct from conformity. Obedience is performed specifically to get an award or to avoid punishment. The biggest conformity study that we need to know for this exam will be the Stanford Prison Experiment, which I already have discussed previously in a video. Here are some factors that influence conformity and obedience. Feel free to pause the video and take notes on this, as it is essentially just a list. Finally, we have social facilitation and loafing. Social facilitation states the presence of others will improve our performance on simple tasks, while it will hinder us on harder tasks. Social loafing, on the other hand, states that less effort will be put into group projects due to the diffusion of effort across several people. This leads to the bystander effect. Diffusion of responsibility makes us less likely to act out in someone's aid when there are large crowds, and as we assume that there will be someone else to help. Lastly, de-individuation occurs when there are large crowds that can help with one's identity. This is what occurs in mobs and riots that allow people to become so violent with no punishment. That's all I have for you guys today. We covered a lot of diseases. So starting with like facilitation, socialization. We did start with that a little, or we did end with that a little bit. But the meat of this video I want you guys to focus on would definitely be the psychological disorders, as well as knowing your own, like, all the different personality traits. That being said, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Happy studying.